We will keep the fantasy train rolling, or the I don't fantasy
Hey,
train
Mr.
probably not.
Fantasy.
Fantasy train's probably not a good reference after that episode of House of
Yeah,
House of the
Pleasure Town. What Pleasure
Pleasure House.
Pleasure House.
They were
It felt like a
coupling.
Pleasure Town though. It was like very weird, but
It was something. Ring of Powers. Rings.
Bell Rings of
Yeah.
Power. Yeah.
Yeah. I let's see. This sort of contained three storylines.
Yeah.
Galadriel and Halbrand were rescued at sea and brought back to a town in which elves are no longer revered as they once were. And we learned that Halbrand is the long lost king of the Southlands. Meanwhile, in the Southlands, Arondir the elf and his merry men are imprisoned in an orc work camp, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they try to make their daring escape unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, the Brandyfoot clan of Hobbit, Half Feet, whatever they're referred to as in the show, were banished to the back of the caravan due to the stranger being kept around and whatever capacity. And the nerdist still believes to be Gandalf, but
they'll just believe whatever they want. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great.
What did you think about episode 3 of the Rings of Power?
Okay, so we both agreed that 2 of the 3 episodes were stuff we like. I think like might have been a strong word. I would say this is a show that I was okay with. I have said that I did not like Game of Thrones. Or sorry,
House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon. I did not like that episode. I thought this episode was okay. It was very boring. I think I texted you and Ty about like this episode is very boring. But then Halbrand broke a couple things, like people's arms and necks, and I like that. I did like that because I do like a little violence in my life. I'm not a violent person. I am. But when it comes to TV shows of this kind of thing, I did like that. I don't even know if I should say I like this. I know it's like going back on it because now I'm like thinking about it. This show has like potential to be, I think, cool and not good. I think cool and good are different. I think that's a big thing. And I think this show has the good potential to be cool. I don't know if it has potential to be good. It can look very cool. It can have cool characters in it. Elves are cool, even though they're not considered cool in the premise of like what people think of them. But I think a problem with this show, even though I think overall like this episode was fine, like at least a story progressed. That's the problem that I had with
House of the Dragon.
Why do I keep calling it?
Well, it's Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragons. Because I have the thing.
Yeah.
Is that I don't think the story progressed at all in there. I do think the story progressed here. We do get a little bit more of that. I just am also now kind of at a point where like I don't care, even though I like know the story's progressing and I think the story's okay. I do need a little bit more, and I will 100% say I don't care about the half-foot people. Like every time they come on the screen, I'm just like, this is boring. And I'll also be honest, I don't care about the hobbits in Lord of the Rings. I don't care. I think The Hobbit is like an okay book that I read because like everyone in the world tells you to read it. It's fine. And then those movies are terrible. There's too much of them. And then when you watch the Lord of the Rings movies, like the Hobbits, I don't care about. And I know that they're an important part, but they're only written as an important part in those movies because they're so stupid and boring that like he had to make them an important part because otherwise none of us would care. Like if the ring wasn't so important to the hobbits, it's like elves and everything else in those movies are awesome, and then the hobbits are just like, oh well, the ring's the most important thing to us. And so I'm an anti-hobbit person. I'm sorry. I'm just anti-hobbit. And you can write that in my profile. You can just be like, I'm anti-hobbit. They're boring. I'm not even sure, like, I feel like Tolkien had like a little friend person in his life, and he just wanted to represent that person in these. And that guy is probably awesome. Probably just crushing it in life. But I do not care. I don't like their storylines. I think it's like makes them almost like it takes advantage of the fact that they're like little people in a way that like it does in a weird way, and it just doesn't sit right with me, and I don't like that. But I do like the story of Halbrand. Like I think Halbrand has this storyline that actually is going to mean a lot. And so that's why I say this is one of the 2 episodes I like, because I think his character is very, very interesting. And I think there's a lot behind that. I also like the elves scene of like, we're trying to get out and then we can't, and all that crap's happening. I thought that scene was really good. So there were 3 or 4 scenes that are really good, but the Hobbit scenes I did not like, and it just doesn't work for me at all. And so this show is struggling for me, but it was better than a show where literally it's just like teenage girls having sex with their uncles. And at least there wasn't that. So I guess that's what I'm going. It's like, at least it wasn't that. It wasn't 18-year-old girls having sex with their uncles. So what a low bar I have right now.
Well then, I'm going to use, this is how I feel about this show, and I'm going to use an analogy from video games. Sometimes a developer pays all of the attention to things that are important, like the engine or the graphical fidelity or one maybe specific mechanic or whatever. And in the end, they forget to like make an actual game. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on here. The world is totally beautiful. Every shot, there's color. There are these beautiful and iconic cities. I don't know if iconic's the right word, but you know, these massive sculptures and things like that. And it's like they poured all of this most expensive TV show ever, all of this money into making this beautiful, absolutely stunning world. Thank you for that face. It's going to be on the thumbnail. And they forgot to give us a compelling story.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I don't know how deeply this ties into, you know, the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit, the different appendices, the Silmarillion, all those old, lesser known Tolkien works. I don't know. But like you said, Halbrand, his character seems like he's going to be really important. So you're telling me he's from a land, he's the king of that land, he's rejecting being the king of that land, but eventually he's going to understand that he needs to have the responsibility to be the king of that land. Doesn't that sound an awful familiar, like someone we've already experienced in some of these works?
Yeah. Sure.
And the son of the naval captain is Isildur, who is the one who defeats Sauron with the sword, cuts the ring in the movies and the books, etc. So that's an important character that they're kind of, you know, ushering in. But this is where, like, I guess what I struggle with is that there are pretty low stakes in this show, because for the same reason that the stakes in Obi-Wan weren't that high, because we know what happens to all those characters. We know what happens to Galadriel. We know what happens to Aragorn, or Elrond rather. We know what happens to Isildur. We know if the stranger is Gandalf or one of these other wizards, maybe it's Saruman, I don't know. We know what happens to them. So at the end of the day, whereas with a Game of Thrones show, whether it be the original Game of Thrones or House of Dragons, where there is that sense of no one has plot armor, many of the characters in this show do. There's just not that level of risk. We know nothing bad's going to happen to Galadriel. We know nothing bad's going to happen to Elrond. And so, like you said, the show was incredibly boring throughout the episode. And so I think that for where this is going, for it to be on the same level as Game of House of Dragons, see, I did too, or Wheel of Time, because right now Wheel of Time to me is better than this. So to be on the same level as those shows, you're going to have to show me something more than just a pretty world. And that's kind of where, like, I'm watching this and I'm like, I don't care. I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad.
Well,
I'm just saying that the world is so beautiful, but where are the characters that make me care? And like, I know, like you said, you're anti-Hobbit. I liked Frodo. And Sam's relationship. I didn't really care about Merry and Pippin, but Frodo and Sam's relationship, I thought was really, really important in the books and the movies, and the way it was conveyed. But like, you care about them. You care about Sam because Sam would give anything for Frodo, and Frodo just gets on him constantly.
Yeah,
and you care about like the relationship between Legolas and Gimli in the trilogy. You care about what Aragorn's past is and how that relates to the future and how they're going to defeat the enemy and all this. And I just, maybe it's because it's early, but I just don't give a shit about any of these characters. And so you're going to have to give me a reason to care for this to kind of pick up and be more than just a pretty landscape.
I'll just have two things to close on my thing. Is I understand that relationship to like the relationship with the Hobbit characters.
Sam and Frodo.
I will, Sam and Frodo. I was like, in general, though, like the relationship there for all the Hobbit characters is very important to this. My only real problem is I always felt that seemed forced in the stories. I did see, because there's so many cooler characters, and it's like, let's take the characters that aren't as cool. Like, because Legolas could have been, Legolas is my favorite character and I'm not the only one who thinks that. I'm just saying. And so you're taking characters that aren't necessarily as cool and making them. The other thing I'll just say is that the way that this series ends is kind of lame. Well, long but lame. Like, they literally, you and I have talked about this. It's lame. They cheat and they win, and it's not really like a well-conceived device to win. Like, that's, and so like that's.
You're referring to the Army of the Dead.
I'm referring to the Army of the Dead, which you and I have discussed as cheating on the highest level. It
did seem like he painted himself into a bit of a corner.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where like it's like taking a basketball team and somehow you're able to take 93 Michael Jordan and just transport him to your team because you're down 10 at the half, and then it's like, here's 93 Michael Jordan, the peak of Michael Jordan powers, and now you win the game, and it's like, well, we won the championships. It's like, well, you didn't. 93 Michael Jordan came back and won that game for you. And so there is that problem with Lord of the Rings in entirety, and I can kind of see that happening here, where you said, like, we already have that storyline, even though I think Halbrand's cool, but there's a reason why I think Halbrand's cool, because it's imprinted in my brain. Because Aragorn's cool. Right. And it's imprinted in my brain. And so that's the problem that I see. we'll see what happens though.
Here's what I'll say
Yeah,
with
we'll
that
see what happens.
is also, I'm sure that there are marked differences between the two, and that if when we post this, some Lord of the Ring fan is going to comment on the video and say, well, this is it. Have a seat.
Lord of the Rings fan, if you have 100,000 viewers on YouTube, comment and then come on our show.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what we want. Yeah.
But also,
we'll talk about it.
Have a seat. Okay. Just take a seat.
Take a seat.
But it was, we talk a lot about feeling like nothing happens in shows and it's not progressing. And I felt with the show like there was very little. There was like stingers here and there. She figures out that it's not a sigil, it's a map. Okay, well, and then you kind of figure out that that's where this labor camp is in the Southlands. And we all kind of know, based on what's being said with these texts, that we're looking at Mordor, the beginnings of Mordor, whatever.
Right, yeah.
It's like this show's an hour long and we only get 3 minutes of things that matter. And I do agree with you that I'm very bored by the Brandyfoot clan and their migratory caravan. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, there's something.
Like, get better at this point. The stranger better be Gandalf. What's that? Like, it better be Gandalf or one of these other wizards, because if it's just like, if he just like learns to talk and is like, hey, I'm Jeff.
Hey,
then that's going to be your big letdown.
You know what? I'm really good at repairing Fords from the 60s. Like, what? Oh, you're from the future?
Yeah. I'm Jeff.
That'd be sick, though. It'd be cool. He's like, yeah, well, that's this Thunderbird I got to take care of. That's what I've been saying the entire time.
I want her to go, what's her name? Nori?
Nori, yeah.
Nori. And he goes, oh, Jeff. Jeffrey.
If
that call me Jeff.
I swear to God, Brent, if that happens, I'm gonna run through the window. I'm just gonna and I'll take a video. I'm like, JD, I'm gonna run through the window. I'm gonna do it. I'll come on the show, it's blood.
It's
God damn, I think it's gonna happen now. I'm gonna have to run through a window.
I'm confident his name's not Jeff. But it's just, I don't know. Like, that whole storyline is just shaping up to be a giant letdown, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like, if he doesn't figure it out and he's like, hey, actually, I would even take him being Radagast the Brown or whatever, the dude from The Hobbit with like the bird shit in his head. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
I just needed to be something. So before we move on to She-Hulk, same question. Do you feel as though that we asked this with House of the Dragon, so if you're video only, you can hop over to the House of Dragon to see what we thought about whether you needed to have watched Game of Thrones prior to watching House of the Dragon to fully enjoy House of the Dragon. So same question. I'm not going to say The Hobbit, but do you think that you need to have watched Lord of the Rings to appreciate this show at its... Here, I think the answer is yes.
I think it's 100% yes.
Because there's people and places and things that are referred to. Like, if you're just watching this and you're like, oh, you've never seen Lord of the Rings, and it's, oh, the Southlands seems like that's going to be important. But if you know Lord of the Rings and you're like, oh shit, that's going to be Mordor. Like, it has a greater
the Southlands are like, what is that? Alabama?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're like, it's Alabama. Right. Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Good football.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Great crawfish.
Right. But I do think that you have to have, I mean, some of the characters are, the elves, Elrond and Galadriel, we've discussed at length. There are important characters in those movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important characters.
Hugo Weaving.
It'd be so weird. I honestly think, of all things, if you watch this show without ever watching those movies or reading those books, and you're just like jumping into this, that's gonna be a fucking trip. Because you're like, I don't know where anything is going. What is this? What
Center for
is
ants.
A center for ants? They have to be at least 3 times as good. It's so good. But yeah, I don't know. If they do like maybe that's the next step for Amazon. It's just a Zoolander prequel.
That'd be dope.
It'd be sick, actually.
I would like that, actually. But anyway,
we'll read.
Yeah, I think that this is. I think you have to have seen that to really fully appreciate this.
This is the thing. I'll just to backtrack on Game of Thrones. God damn.
House of the
Whatever.
Dragon.
It's House of the Dragon. It's whatever. Yeah. If there was one head cut off in that entire episode, I'd be like, this is fine. And then rings the tower. I've been like, I just need a head cut off. All I needed is someone to be like, you slept with my sister's cousin, Ka-chung. And I'd be like, sick. Head on the ground. Let's do it. That's where I'm at. Because I look at Game of Thrones in general, not the show in general, but I look at Game of Thrones as the Italian mafia. And that's where I look at it. I know it's related to like the roses and all that shit, but I look at it as the mafia, where it's like you do one thing wrong,
War of the Roses, yeah.
Something's getting cut off, and it's usually your head. Or
not in the yeah. All right. Yeah, for me, I hope that this kind of picks up. I'm looking forward to that. So
me too.
But we'll move on.